Get a dictionary. Can't believe every father in the world was born today. That's how backed up I'm with this. Humbled by the love. No offense, but you made the scenes. I don't make the rules. Warning, trespassers will be prostituted. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Christmas. God bless. Inhale the future. Exhale the past. The worst thing about owls is the way they can maintain eye contact when you put them in a microwave. Nothing says feel as like shampoo, raw dough, and cone jazz. What is a shampoo, raw dough, and cone jazz? I don't mean to body shame, but this cat looks stupid as hell. That's not a cat. All coupons are one per person per visit. Always wanted to do this with my starting wheel. What is a starting wheel? We hit 1,000K on Twitter. Hashtag Team Real. How can you hit 1,000K? They got a new water bowel. So they eating shit. I love Spanish milk tea. I'm black and even I know this is called a horchata. Credit card only, debit card only. Which one is it? BMW or Audi, y'all? A BMW or Audi. High banters, events are killing me. Homework and stop them. Hello, my next door neighbor's internet is very slow. I have been using his Wi-Fi for several years now, and suddenly my download speed has dropped. Is there a way I can speed it up without asking him, as we are not strictly on speaking terms? It's a spat at one of the children. Why did you spit out his children? Rumors are carried by haters, spread by fools, accepted by idiots. I can't read that. They're engaged. Who made that cake? 2 words, and you still managed to f that up. I'm getting married in 4 mouths. I need to find a pair of shoes to wear with my dress. I'm in a relationship. Left me alone. Shamilla, yep. That's what the Molly will do to. Yeah, that's what the Facebook ever on you. I can't with this anymore. I'm scheduling an hysterectomy. A hysterectomy in school, and this is mad boring. Can't wait till June to get up out of there. Yeah, you need to stay in school. You might get summer school after this. I gotta give a moment to my sponsor. It's sponsored by Homemade Jam Black Raspberry. Tastes just like grandma. Girl, why are you sad? What's wrong? My name is Seth. A kid born in 2005 is now 20 years old, closed due to safety hazard. Safety hazard. I still don't understand how people can just type this, look at it, print it out, and still post it on the damn phone. No, this did not happen on Obama's inauguration. Instead, we took the punch to the gut and accepted it. At 4:09, there was a died body. 4:09, there was a fucking died body. Holy shit! Foot long and tips for $3.99. Buy America. Hello, Hawaii. Big Smoke. If you use a sex toy while you're pregnant, will your baby have shaky baby syndrome? Great Northern Jerk-Off celebrates 20th anniversary with 38 entries. He jerked off 38 times. Beer battered sauerkraut mixed with grilled onions on a hot dog. Yeah. Baby getting circumcised tomorrow. Why you not let them do it at birthday? We told them then that we wanted him circumcised. That no one decided to correct him on this. You can't fake worship. It requires you to be authentic. What's with the electrical college and electrical college? Why do electricians get to pick the president? Dumb. Yes, dumb. The baby cannot hold him the damn birth control. How? I hate having insomnia. I never sleep. I've read this 23 times and only realized the 24th time that you're trying to spell insomnia. And if it wasn't for that tweet, I wouldn't even know what the hell he was trying to say. That poor girl actually I can't make this up, man. Ronical ammonia. Yay. Ronical ammonia? What if my great grandson? Did you spell anything right on it? You know, Facebook does have an edit button, though. And I want some meatloaf, homemade mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. I think I'm about to go to bed. No, you're not allowed. You know any colored pastors who are single. Why does school exit? I think your comment should explain why. More importantly, how the hell do you get the flower reaction? Put your phone in the ground and water it for 5 days. And I bet he did that. I love how stupid all of you are. Natural selection at its finest. Yes, natural selection. Turns out I wasn't pregnant. I just had a fever, and that online survey I did was just a scam to get pictures of my vagina and butthole. So I'm selling my crib on Craigslist. DM for details. What? Is now selling free coffee for $1. Free coffee for $1. I swear she is possessed. If this is bad, just check out my Instagram comments. I'm better at making money than making tomorrow friends. Order here, clothes from Max. Does anyone know someone who's trying to buy a car? It's a 1998 Jeep Cherokee. Debbie, you better go pick your kids up at Nats. Leave her with you kids, and she has already got kids to look after your disgrace of a sister. This happened in
disgrace.
I hope this is not a student. We have no plans to release any complaint-based flavored cola. If you want the taste of incompetence, there are other sodas more readily available. This is not a good marketing strategy. How can you call yourself a queen when objectify yourself like a whore? No exchanges on plastic tablecloth. What is a plastic tablecloth?
Meditation feels good.
Stop being so exaggerate. There's someone cutting their grass right now. You know what? Every time I record, something always happens. And that's probably that same neighbor that doesn't even have grass to cut. Man poured salt on the beach. He catched something that will give you the creeps. He catched question. Why don't they just make wheelchairs with pedals so when your arms get tired, you can just pedal to go? So I just thought the lights flickered, but then realized I only just blinked. Dumb fuck. This person used 13,000 pennies to create this pink floor. Joke's on him because now he just wasted $13,000. Is it pronounced Jif or Jif? Jif. See, that's exactly what I thought. Wow, today is 3/17/17. Just imagine when it's 17/17/17. Looking for an organism, Walt Disney Cinderella. Can anyone help me find one? Okay, I just farted and I think my butthole spoke to me. Okay, that happened to me before. I go blind. Does someone have the number 2 in eggs or cysts? I think I'm possessed. I can do.
No.
If you don't, thumbs up anyway, because you will.
Oh, that's funny.
Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio is by far one of the top roller coaster destinations on Earth. With a whopping 16 coasters to choose from in a picturesque peninsula setting, this is without a doubt a must-visit for all enthusiasts. Over Cedar Point's 147-year history, it has seen several attractions come and go, one of which dates all the way back to the 1800s. Today we'll be taking a look at all of the coasters that formerly operated at this world-famous theme park. To choose from in a picturesque peninsula setting, this is without a doubt a must-visit for all enthusiasts. Over Cedar Point's 147-year history, it has seen several attractions come and go, one of which dates all the way back to the 1800s. Today we'll be taking a look at all of the coasters that formerly operated at this world-famous theme park from oldest to newest. Before I officially get started though, here's an honorable mention I'd like to bring up. The original Mantis, opened in 1996, closed in 2014.
That was a rough roller coaster, if you know what I mean.
It's debatable whether or not this is actually a former coaster. While the track itself is still up and functional, the ride experience and appearance have drastically changed ever since this ride first opened. The coaster, now known as Rougarou, originally opened as
Rougarou,
a B&M stand-up coaster. This coaster was originally going to be named Banshee, which is a female spirit of the dead from Irish mythology, but after the name was published in a local newspaper, park guests found the name to be too dark for a roller coaster. Eventually, Cedar Fair would end up reusing the name Banshee for a 2014 B&M Inver at Kings Island. The original logo was also eventually worked into the current logo of Steel Force at Dorney Park. As for Mantis, it ended up running as a stand-up coaster for almost 2 decades. However, in 2015, this coaster was given a serious makeover. It received a brand new color scheme as well as a new set of floating screens. Some long for the classic stand-up experience, while others say this is a much-needed upgrade in an age where stand-up coasters are becoming less and less popular.
Yep.
So which category do you fall into? Anyway, let's get things officially started with number 16, Switchback Railway. Opened in 1892, closed in 1901. This model right here was the first ever roller coaster to be designed for American amusement parks. After the first one opened at Brooklyn's Coney Island, it became a massive hit with the public. So naturally, it was seen all across the country in the late 1800s. This coaster was 100% hand-operated and was as simple as you could get. There were no bank turns, no inversions, and not even any seat belts. Nevertheless, for thrill seekers in the 1800s, this must have felt like Millennium Force back then. While this manual coaster model has since become extinct, we can absolutely thank it for paving the way for the many amazing attractions around the world today. Number 15, Loop the Loop, opened in 1902, closed in 1909. Right after the Switchback Railway closed, Cedar Point opened their first coaster with a chain lift. According to the Roller Coaster Database, this ride was named Loop the Loop, but it is often listed as the three-way figure-eight roller toboggan. Try saying that 5 times fast. This was a side friction coaster that used a revolutionary set of wheels on the sides of the trains to avoid derailments and allowed for sharper turns. Around 1910, this coaster was moved to another part of the park to allow for a new beach house to be built. It was eventually refurbished into an all-new ride experience called Racer, but we'll get to that later. Number 14, Scenic Railway, opened in 1908, closed in 1917. This is yet another side friction coaster that opened 6 years after Loop the Loop. According to old photographs, this coaster had a very impressive looking triple down. In an age with only lap bars and no seat belts, who knows what kind of airtime this ride gave. Also, according to old photographs, this coaster was just as scenic as the name suggested, flying through trees and even over water. And at just 10 cents a ride back in the day, there's no doubt this coaster was quite a bargain. Number 13, Racer. Opened in 1910, closed in 1928. Like I said before, the park's second coaster, Loop the Loop, was moved to another section of the park in 1910 in order to allow a new beach house to be built. When the coaster was rebuilt in its new spot, it received a massive refurbishment. A second identical track was built right next to it, making it a racing coaster naturally named Racer. Proving to be a much more popular ride experience than Loop the Loop, it would continue to operate until 1928 when it was torn down and replaced with Cyclone coaster. But once again, we'll get to that later. Number 12, Leap the Dips. Opened in 1912, closed in 1935. Not to be confused with the still standing Leap the Dips at Lakemont Park, this side friction coaster was actually very different. While the one at Lakemont Park has a figure-eight layout, this was an out-and-back coaster. Moreover, while the one at Lakemont Park was manufactured by the Federal Construction Company, this one was manufactured by Andy Vettel, who would later go on to create Kennywood's Thunderball. Not much else is known about Cedar Point's Leap the Dips, other than that it remained popular throughout the 1920s before its popularity seriously died down in the 30s. Its declining popularity eventually led it to be torn down in 1935, though I'm sure if it was still open today, it would be considered a landmark coaster. Number 11, High Frolics, opened in 1918, closed in 1940. In addition to Leap the Dips, Andy Vettel manufactured High Frolics, which at one point was the tallest roller coaster at Cedar Point. This classic wooden coaster was originally known as the Leapfrog Railway, but in 1933 it received a massive renovation. It was renamed High Frolics and given a 75-foot lift hill, which at the time must have looked enormous to the general public. Unfortunately, just 7 years after this renovation, the coaster closed down for good in 1940. Though to be fair, it did last longer than the park's other roller coasters at the time. Number 10, Cyclone, opened in 1929, closed in 1951. While this certainly wasn't the first roller coaster named Cyclone to be built, it actually has a pretty interesting history behind it. After the 1928 season, the Racer was replaced by the much bigger and better Cyclone, a wooden coaster manufactured by Henry G. Traver, who also helped design the still operating Thunderbolt at Six Flags New England. According to the book The Golden Age of Roller Coasters, this was perhaps the roughest coaster in history, often bruising riders and occasionally breaking bones. Nevertheless, it managed to stay standing during the Great Depression and was the only Cedar Point coaster still standing after World War II. Unfortunately, by 1949, Cedar Point's financial issues left no funds available to renovate Cyclone, so it was torn down in 1951. If you live in the Sandusky area, definitely ask your grandparents what they remember about this coaster, as it certainly is a fascinating one. Number 9, Super Coaster, opened in 1952, closed in 1964. Believe it or not, this was Cedar Point's first ever steel coaster, which just goes to show how far they've come. This was an Alan Herschel kiddie coaster with a run-of-the-mill Little Dipper layout, so there's really not much to say about this one. Surprisingly enough, there are still plenty of Alan Herschel Little Dippers out there, including one at Connecticut's Quasi Amusement Park, which just happened to be my 91st credit. On the more unusual side, there's also one in Montana that actually circles around a drive-in movie screen. Now that's something you definitely don't see every day. Number 8, Wild Mouse, Opened in 1959, closed in 1962. Back in the day, the Wild Mouse coaster was a revolutionary attraction that gave guests the illusion that they would fly off the track with sharp and sudden turnarounds. And this ride was certainly no different. Despite the popularity of Wild Mouse coasters at the time, though, it would end up being a very short-lived attraction, lasting just 4 seasons at the park before its closure in 1962. But this wasn't the only Wild Mouse to come to the park. Number 7, Scamper, opened in 1962, closed in 1969. The same year that Wild Mouse closed, another Wild Mouse named Scamper opened to the public. Unlike the park's first Wild Mouse, this one was made of wood. When Wild Mouse coasters first got their start, most of them were in fact made of wood. Despite the abundance of these wooden Wild Mouse coasters back in the day, though, they are pretty rare to come by nowadays. There's one at England's Blackpool Pleasure Beach and another one at Sydney, Australia's Luna Park. Surprisingly enough, the remaining 2 wooden Wild Mouse coasters are in Indonesia, so if you're an Indonesian coaster enthusiast, you too can get a rare credit. Number 6, Broadway Trip, opened in 1964, closed the same year. Before the days of Helix and Blue Fire, Mack Rides got their start making portable coasters. One of these rides was Broadway Trip, a coaster that made its way to 5 different parks over its lifetime. After a brief 1-year run at Seattle, Washington's defunct Fun Forest Amusement Park, Broadway Trip made its way to Cedar Point for another 1-year run in 1964. So far, only one picture of this coaster is known to exist, and it is currently on display at Cedar Point's Town Hall Museum. During the final years of its lifetime, this coaster operated at Casino Pier under the new name Wizard's Cavern, and would continue to operate all the way until 2003, when it was permanently scrapped. For a coaster that just spent 1 year at Cedar Point, it sure does have a lengthy history. Number 5, Wildcat, opened in 1970, closed in 1978. This was the first of 2 Schwarzkopf Wildcats to come to Cedar Point. Despite the fact that it only operated at the park for 9 seasons, it wasn't removed because there was anything wrong with it. In 1978, Cedar Point acquired Shakopee, Minnesota's Valley Fair. This acquisition led to the company now known as Cedar Fair, combining Cedar Point and Valley Fair's names together. Anyway, by the end of the 1978 season, Cedar Point decided to give their Wildcat to Valley Fair and buy a new Wildcat for their own park to use. Their original Wildcat would go on to operate at Valley Fair for 20 seasons until it was relocated once again in 1999 to Maryland's Jolly Roger Amusement Park. And believe it or not, this ride continues to operate to this day. Number 4, Jumbo Jet, opened in 1972, closed in 1978. In 1972, Schwarzkopf debuted their first ever Jumbo Jet model at Cedar Point. This was the 3rd incarnation of their Jetstar model and was the biggest and most impressive looking one yet. It stood where the old Cyclone roller coaster did and was known for its amazing view of Lake Erie. Unfortunately, it ended up having a short 7-season run at the park. This portable coaster ended up being relocated 5 more times. First it went to Palace Playland in Maine. Then it went to a Swedish park named Malmö Folkets, a defunct Russian park called Bearland, a theme park in Belarus called Dreamland, and finally it ended up at another park in Belarus called Chulyov-Kinsev Park, where it is currently still in operation. So if you ever find yourself in Belarus, feel free to check out this jumbo-sized piece of Cedar Point's history. Number 3, Wildcat.
Yep.
In 1979, closed in
Never got to go on Wildcat.
This is the second Schwarzkopf Wildcat to come to Cedar Point. Like I've said before, this replaced the older Wildcat when that one was sent to Valley Fair. Unlike the park's previous Wildcat, though, this one has since been torn down and sent to the scrapyard. It had a respectively long run at the park, but unfortunately in 2011, Cedar Point announced that the coaster had reached the end of its service life. So at the end of the 2011 season, Cedar Point didn't hesitate to tear down this coaster in order to expand the park's Celebration Plaza. The spot where Wildcat once stood is now occupied by a new nighttime show called Luminosity. While this does look like one incredible show... Yeah,
it closes down the freaking Iron Dragon early, damn it!
Number 2, Disaster Transport.
Oh, I missed that one.
1985, closed in 2012. This Intamin bobsled coaster first opened in 1985 as an outdoor attraction called Avalanche Run. However, in 1990, it was given a multi-million-dollar renovation that involved enclosing the coaster in a large steel structure, as well as adding a space theme and giving it all new special effects. This made it the only fully enclosed coaster to operate at Cedar Point, and it was pretty much the Space Mountain of the Midwest. The only downside, though, was that unlike most other roller coasters that are indoors, this ride actually had to be shut down in the rain. This was due to leaks in the structure allowing rainwater to pool inside the bobsled track, meaning that even after the rain stopped, several trains had to be cycled before the ride could reopen. Nevertheless, this ride gained a cult following over the years, and when it finally closed in 2012, a good number of fans showed up for one last ride. This is certainly one of those coasters that is gone but definitely not forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
Number 1, the original Mean Streak, opened in 1991, closed in 2016. In 1991, Mean Streak opened as the world's tallest wooden roller coaster. It stood at an impressive 161 feet tall and proved to be a popular coaster at the time. Unfortunately, during the later years of its lifetime, it became known as a very rough ride, and many considered it to be one of the worst roller coasters out there. Nevertheless, Mean Streak certainly did have its fans, including Mean Streak Henry, a man who rode this coaster over 16,000 times during its lifetime. Based on this ride's rough reputation, a feat like that certainly takes steps to accomplish. Despite the coaster being retracked multiple times during its lifetime, it ended up closing down for good in 2016. On the other hand, while the original wooden coaster experience is gone forever, the same can't really be said about the coaster itself, at least the structure of it. As of right now, the fine folks at Rocky Mountain Construction are hard at work to turn this into a massive hybrid coaster by next year. What was once one of the most unpopular
Ew, when that thing was still running across some speed.
Welcome to the Coast Reviews. We're at Kings Island, and this is The Bat, HD POV.
Enjoy your 51, Bob Brother. Jerry Woods here on The Bat.
Welcome to the Coast Reviews. We're at Kings Island, and this is The Bat, HD POV.
Okay, I'm gonna have to end the live video because YouTube does not want to cooperate with me. So I'll see you guys later.